Pam Pearsall, and I'm here today with my good friend Clark Tenney from the Prescott Unified School District. He's also on the Prescott City Council. Fair warning, Clark is a good friend of mine, and I really appreciate you being here today, but I have hard questions because I have questions.
You bet.
Okay, so I hear that our school is woke and that you teach critical race theory.
Sure.
Which, that doesn't sound good to me, so tell me, what's going on?
Yeah, great question. People ask us about those things occasionally. One of the questions that I often ask them when they say, are you teaching woke things or critical race theory? I ask, what's your definition of that? That means different things to different people. Most often, they have a difficult time defining it themselves. And so for folks to then turn around and accuse us of doing something they're not even really sure what it is a little confusing for me. But long story short, no, we don't teach critical race theory at all. The tenets of critical race theory are not a part of state standards at all, not a part of any curriculum that's been adopted by Prescott Unified School District, excuse me. And so that's not a part of our curriculum at all. We do discuss things like historical issues in U.S. history classes, social studies class, like the civil rights movement and slavery in the United States, things like that. But we look at that from all different angles and try to take a very fair and balanced approach.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but isn't critical race theory like racist against white people?
Yeah, so my understanding of critical race theory is it's something that was generated in universities in the 70s, particularly law schools of universities, that looked at things through a lens of Black people having been historically oppressed in the United States and whatnot. That's not a lens that we look at things through in Prescott Unified School District at all. It's not something that we do. There's a handful of people in the community who, their kids have brought home something that says, hey, we talked about how Black people are sometimes discriminated against, or were in the 60s, and they say critical race theory. No, United States history is what that is. And again, we ask our teachers to be fair and balanced when they talk about those things and look at all different aspects of things. We certainly do not teach children to hate their skin or hate their ancestors or be ashamed of any of those things, whether they happen to have lighter colored skin like me or darker colored skin like some other folks. Those aren't things that we teach.
That's kind of a relief. I knew that you wouldn't be involved in anything like that. I had confidence. But you have like a partnership with the Launchpad. I recently did an interview with the Launchpad, and then I got a lot of feedback about people that have some issues with the Launchpad.
Sure.
But you have a partnership with them, and that's where the woke comes in. They're saying the school's woke because you have this association with the Launchpad, and they feel like the Launchpad is woke. So can you tell me about that partnership?
Sure, yeah. So Prescott Unified School District has partnerships with a number of different organizations in town. We have partnerships and memorandums of understanding or intergovernmental agreements with the City of Prescott, with the Republican Women of Prescott, with various churches in town, with the Highland Center for Natural History, with the Launchpad as well. Absolutely, that is the case. Each one of those organizations, the memorandums of understanding and the intergovernmental agreements spell out what things they can do for and with us and what things they can't do in many cases. And each of those organizations has things that they do that are separate from their partnership for the school that we have no purview over and frankly, no official interest in. There are those of us who have personal feelings about what a certain church teaches about things or whatnot, but that part of their organization's mission has nothing to do with their interface with our schools. They come and they paint the walls of a classroom for us. And if a church teaches a certain thing that I support or don't support, it has nothing to do with their painting the walls in our classroom, the service that they give, for instance. The Launchpad does a couple of different things for us. They help run a group called Boys to Men in our schools, where young men are taught to respect women and to work hard and kind of what their place in society is, that type of thing, real positive values. In addition to that, they offer tutoring and a place for kids to go after school. We love our partnership with them in those circles. And some of the other things that they do in the community have nothing to do with Prescott Unified School District.
Just like if the Democrat women, you're a Republican, right?
Yes.
If the Democrat women or Democrats had a service, they were going to do tutoring, you'd be okay, but you'd say, let's keep the politics out of the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you a good example of that. The Republican Women of Prescott is another organization that we've had a long-term partnership with here in Prescott. They have sent their folks, our members, to volunteer in our schools for many years. When I was principal at Abayajud Elementary School, we had folks from RWAP coming all the time to help with reading groups and help in classrooms. Love that. if we had someone from the community come to us and say, I don't like the politics of RWAP or the Democratic Women or this church or that organization or whatnot, I demand that you sever your ties with them. And we'd say, wait, hold on. That has nothing to do with where the Republican Party stands on campaign financing or abortion or whatnot. It has nothing to do with these reading groups, our interface with them in their schools. We appreciate what they do for our kids and their partnership. And we're going to stay away from those other pieces that have nothing to do with their partnership with us. Same thing with the Launchpad.
So that gets me to two questions.
Sure.
First of all, do you need any more partnerships with any more people or organizations?
Yeah, great question. The answer to that is absolutely yes. So before COVID, we had a ton of volunteering in our schools. That's one of the things that we love about Prescott is there's so many people with a heart to serve. Mm-hmm. And frankly, because we skew a little bit older demographically, there's a lot of folks who are in their retirement years. And so people with some more time, people with expertise, they've spent a long career doing something that they can really help in our schools. And we have a ton of that. So prior to COVID, we had folks in our schools a bunch. With COVID, obviously, we had to restrict down who was coming and going from schools because there was illness going around in the community. We didn't want to spread that, particularly to the demographic segment that was most impacted by that, right? Older folks. At this point, though, we're back up and running full steam as far as our programs are concerned.
But you haven't regained all your volunteers
Absolutely,
back yet.
Yeah. So we've got a volunteer coordinator, Deb Prieto is her name, and we can share. If you give a call to the school district, we'll put you in touch with her.
Okay.
She gets with folks and has them fill out a short application. We do a background check, of course, on all of our folks who are going to interface with our kids as volunteers in the schools of our long-term.
So you do a background check to make sure they're not predators or anything like that.
Yeah,
but you don't do a background check to make sure that their politics line up with yours.
Great question. Absolutely. That has nothing to do with it. A lot of folks have tried to equate politics with what's going on in our schools or what they'd like to have going on in our schools. The two ought to be 100% separate. We don't want politics in our schools. We don't
one way or another.
We don't want left-leaning politics. We don't want right-leaning politics. I happen to be a Republican, but that has nothing to do with my role in our schools.
Okay. So you just don't want predators because those are our children and we got to be careful. So on your memorandum of understanding, it defines what their role in the school is going to be. Right. They're going to tutor or they're going to mentor. Does it also define, or do you verbally define what would be unacceptable for them to do in our schools? Yeah,
great question. Just like any set of things, there's 1,000 things that you don't want people to do, and we don't write all 1,000 things. You must not come, wearing flip-flops. So what they cannot do is not written out line for line, but what they are allowed to do then essentially excludes those other things, and those things are written out in a legal document. Many of the organizations that we have partnerships with, we don't have an official memorandum of understanding or an intergovernmental agreement. We just talk with them about, hey, you want to come in and do this? Let's have you paint those walls, or let's have you come in and make phone calls and help us with attendance or things like that. We don't write up a formal legal document. In the case of the Launchpad, we did write up a formal legal document because we wanted to set kind of where the boundaries were.
Okay, perfect. Now, how has your enrollment been? Has it went down with the pandemic, or how are you doing with enrollment?
Great question. So every school in the United States of America that I'm aware of had enrollment decrease during the pandemic. There were people who were scared to send their kids to school, or people who were sick, or people who decided to homeschool briefly. So prior to the pandemic, we had our enrollment on day 12 of the year, our last year before the pandemic, if I remember correctly, was 3,934 students. We dropped almost 250 students over the course of the 2 years of the pandemic. But this year we're back up to over 4,000 students. So we're above our pre-pandemic enrollment and over 200 kids more than we had at this time last year.
So when you increased that quickly, did you have to lay off when you were down so much?
Great question. So everyone assumed, including us, that the pandemic would be much more temporary than it was. So had we known this is going to be a 2-year thing, we probably would have made different adjustments than we did. But the short answer is no, we didn't lay off teachers for the most part. So our class sizes were smaller. And for quite some time, as all schools were trying to have less density in their schools because of the recommendations from healthcare experts and in terms of the way that the virus was spread, et cetera, it was ideal to have fewer kids per class than we had before. And now, again, that we're back up to higher than our pre-pandemic numbers, it's a really good thing we didn't lay folks off. You're probably aware.
Make it a lot easier.
Yeah. Nationwide, there's what a lot of folks have called a teacher crisis. That's particularly the case in a state like Arizona, where education is funded per pupil at the lowest in the United States of America. We've been in the bottom 3 each of the last 10 years in a row. And so there is not enough money to do anything in the way that other states do. We can't have programs the way that other states do. We don't pay our administrators the way other states do. We certainly don't pay our teachers the way other states do. And so if there's a teacher crisis in Colorado, there's definitely one in Arizona. As of January of this calendar year, there were over 2,000 teaching positions in Arizona unfilled. Fortunately, in Prescott Unified School District, we have 3 right now that are unfilled.
That's
and
good.
we're able to fill those with substitutes and combined classes, things like that. I mean, there's never a situation in any school where kids show up and there's just not a teacher, and kids throw things at each other for 45 minutes and move on to the next class. They make adjustments, but the adjustments are not optimum for education, as you can imagine. We're in a great place as far as PUSD is concerned, that people love to live here. We've got a great reputation. Our enrollment is increasing. Our test scores exceed those of other schools statewide and here in the county, certainly. So we've got a good reputation that way. And we draw a lot of teachers here that might not want to work someplace else in Arizona.
Are we one of the tops because of all the volunteers, you think? Do you think that helps?
Yeah, great question. And so I want to be clear and not say that we're one of the top schools in terms of test scores, but it is the case that across the board, we are above county averages in every case, at every grade level, in both math and English language arts and science. And we're above state averages generally as well. So are we one of the top 5 schools in the state? Probably not, but there are hundreds and hundreds of schools in the state, and we're certainly above state averages. And so and one of the reasons, I think you're exactly right, we are able to fill all of our positions, like I say. We're generally able to fill them with qualified teachers, which is not always the case in rural Arizona. And then our volunteer program really makes a difference as well.
Okay.
You're exactly
Now,
right.
that's a volunteer program that you do. Do you think that saves taxpayer? Because I go to taxes.
Sure, absolutely.
Do you think that saves taxpayer money, or is it a wash? I mean, how does that?
No, yeah, 100%. If we were to try to staff when we have a reading group, for instance, and there's a volunteer who comes in every Tuesday and Thursday to work with third graders for 2 hours, or set groups of third graders for 2 hours. If we had to hire someone to do that, assuming we could find people who want to do that, that's a difficulty these days as well, particularly for what we're able to pay for non-certified staff. Yeah, absolutely, it would cost the taxpayers money. Really, there's 3 pieces that we always look at when we work with our governing board to set our budget each year. One is programs, one is pay for salaries for our folks, and the other is class sizes. And it's always a balance between those. So if we pay more to teachers, then class sizes go up. Or if class sizes go down, then we have less for programs, and we have to cut music or art or PE or things like that other districts have historically done. We've been fortunate in Prescott to balance those really pretty well over the last 2 years.
Thank you so much for being with me. Is there anything else you want to bring up that I forgot to ask you?
No, I'm just happy to visit with you. Okay. So nice to see you. We go back years and years, so it's super nice to visit with you. And I'm glad to be asked questions. Oh, actually, there is one thing. We get asked questions all the time from our community members. Some of them are genuine questions, people curious. Sometimes they come in the form of less pleasant inquiries. But at any rate, information about, do you teach citizenship in your schools? Why don't you teach citizenship in your schools? And sometimes we hear that. Or what are you doing about pronouns? Or do you ask kids their pronouns? Or aren't administrators in your schools paid way more than other places? Or how much of the money in your budget goes to classrooms? What about critical race theory? What about social emotional learning? Those are all excellent questions. And we've got a list of about 9 or 10 different questions that were commonly asked by the community right on the front page of our website. So if folks will go to www.prescottschools.com, it's plural, prescottschools.com. Right on the front page, you'll see those questions. Then you can click on those, and there's a document that goes into depth to answer each one of those. So if you're interested about critical race theory, you read about a page and a half of how we approach that or how we don't approach that, and as the case may be.
That's great. I love the transparency. I think schools should be transparent. Sure, parents have a right to know these things.
Absolutely. In fact, parents' rights is one of the little essays that people can read about. What rights do parents have in your schools, and how do you approach that? So
good.
Great
Okay,
question.
well, we'll put those links under the interview today.
Great.
And thank you for being with me. And this is Pam Pearsall. Until next time, thank you so much.
Thanks.